Chris, you spoke here about this book, about the history of Parliament.
Yeah.
And you spoke very entertainingly, if I may say so, about the shenanigans and the corruption. As you know, I'm a candidate for the European elections in Greece, and there's a huge issue with corruption and the standing of Parliament and all sorts of things. I think I've seen it all before in the history of English or British Parliament. What changed British Parliament, if it has indeed changed since the 19th century?
Well, there were a group of reformers, basically, and some courageous individuals, but it came in waves. Nothing was ever achieved all in one fell swoop. You know, even what's referred to as the Great Reform Act in 1832, which abolished some of the... There were parliamentary seats in this country that had no voters living there.
Yes.
And the seats could be bought and sold, and they were bought and sold right up until 1812. One was sold for £32,000. And the Crown was very involved in that. The government made sure that it always won, and so on.
And the electorate was tiny, right? It was like 6% of the people after the Reform Act.
Even after the Reform
Even
Act.
after it was double the
it was still, but it was still tiny.
Did you know that in 1844, Greece gave the suffrage to all men without property qualification? 1844.
And it was 1919 in this country that we did it.
So there's a long history of parliamentarianism. But you see...
you are the cradle of democracy.
Well, you see, but we have a modern history too.
But when they say that, it's a kind of slightly of a version of democracy.
Yeah. Well,
my point is that there's lots of versions of democracy.
Indeed, indeed.
You could argue, you know, that the House of Commons voted for a representative system of voting in 1911, but the House of Lords voted for a different system. And then we ended up sticking with what we have. But way back beyond, we used to have probably a proportional system.
Right. Now let's come to that, because we are discussing electoral systems in Greece at the moment, and one of the big problems is how big the constituencies have become. So Athens has 2 constituencies, and Piraeus and Thessaloniki, the biggest cities, the 6 constituencies. I think a third of Parliament as a whole. So if you want to be a cabinet minister, you stand in those constituencies, and you become very prominent nationally. But of course, it costs a lot of money, and you need a lot of television exposure. So, I think that what's your experience of the single-member constituencies that you were elected a few? When were you elected? 10 years, 15 years ago?
13 years ago.
13 years ago.
There is a strength about the single-member constituency, which is that you.
How were you selected by your party?
My party advertised, and I applied.
Anyone could apply?
Any member of the party could apply.
Any member of the party,
And the local members, all 400 of them, had, first of all, they had little branch meetings to nominate people, and then a shortlist was drawn up, and then there was a hustings meeting at which people could vote. We made our little speeches, we were asked questions, and then you had a vote. And I won. And we used an exhaustive ballot to win. So you vote, and then you eliminate people.
So you vote again and
until
again.
somebody gets a majority.
Yes.
Do
you need money now when you campaign for your election? How much
you need
money?
a bit of money to get selected. Maybe £400, £500, which might be prohibitive for some people.
My constituency right now is about 10 million people.
Right, my constituency is 50,000 voters.
50,000 voters.
But to get elected in a general election, I probably spend £5,000. Not me personally, but my local party.
Well, I'll probably spend much less than that for my 10 million.
Right. But it's not my money. My party pays.
Really,
the problem about...
My party's very poor. I pay for everything myself.
The problem with our system is it's very difficult to set up a new party.
Yes, well, indeed it is in Greece too. Yes.
But you have the dominance of the more or less the 2-party system or the 2.5-party system that we have in the UK. The whips who make sure that business is carried through in Parliament and make sure you vote with your party. They have a great deal of
very similar
power.
And
but it means that actually the big parties are actually a coalition of views.
Yes.
So often the press, the media, is about teasing apart the difference within the coalition. So within the Labour Party, between the Socialists and the Democrats, as it were.
Yeah. Now, you were a minister for Europe for a while. I'm sure you follow what's going on. I mean, what's your view? What are the most important challenges for the next 5 years? This European election, what will it decide at the European level? I know what is at stake at the UK, but the European Parliament. What do you think are the What's on the agenda for the next 5 years in the European Parliament?
Well, if you were to read the British press, you would think that Europe is a basket case and it's all a disaster, and we're all
it's
going to
very
hell in a
negative.
handcart and all the rest of it. I actually think that the European Union is the greatest single political success that I can think of.
I agree.
It has meant that countries which in my lifetime were dictatorships either of the left or of the right, in Spain,
Bulgaria, Romania,
are now not dictatorships. You do not have the death penalty. You do have free speech, etc., etc. You have a recognition of human rights across the continent. You have a market where you can't use anti-competitive practices to prevent other people from entering the market. You can't have monopolies and all the rest of it. It's far from perfect.
Well, the criticism in Greece is that the European Union, in particular, in Europe as a whole, is attacking social rights. Is that right? What do you think? You're a Labour Party member.
It's not.
It's not.
My reading of Greek politics, and I'm not by any means an expert, but my analysis was that you've had two parties which have become dynasties.
Yes.
That's never great, I think, for politics.
Yeah.
It's concentrated in a very small number of families.
Yes.
It's become a class of its own. There's a problem about this, incidentally, in the British Parliament as well.
Yes.
And also, the thing that I think you've done amazingly well is that for centuries you were a diaspora nation. You exported people.
Yes.
And then 10, 15 years ago, you started importing people, in particular from Albania and elsewhere. And that, to manage to do that without violence.
Until the crisis, there was no violence.
Yeah.
Since the crisis started, there is violence. And of course, there's Golden Dawn, as you know, which is a racist party. Yeah.
But I would say that is because you gave the word diaspora to the world.
Yes. No, he was very open for all this time. There were no problems. There's no mental violence.
But also, you had, we all laugh about all those unfinished houses in Greece where nobody was paying any local income tax.
Yes. Final question. My party, Potami, the river, is campaigning for civil partnerships, gay civil partnerships. What's your experience? You are yourself in a civil partnership.
I am.
How did this change happen? In my time in Britain, the attitudes have changed completely in 20 years. What happened? What changed? Now, we've got equal rights for everyone.
When I was first involved in the Labour Party in the early 1990s, Mrs. Thatcher had introduced laws which prohibited teachers from referring to homosexuals as equal members of society. You had anybody who mentioned gay rights was described as loony left. And was hounded out. It's very, very difficult. And it's been an amazing transformation. One of the big things that changed it was that members of Parliament started to come out.
Yes, some courageous people.
Chris Smith in particular, and then a few others. And because in the end, this is a bit Paulo Freire, but I believe that you can only liberate yourself. You can't liberate other people.
And it's cross-party agreement, isn't it? It's not a conservative. It was never a conservative Labour disagreement on that.
It was a conservative Labour. It was big time.
Really, it's not because it's not anymore, is it? It's total consensus.
It's not total consensus. There's never total consensus. And most of the people who voted against were conservative.
Right.
95% of the people who voted against gay marriage here were conservative. But even the Conservative Party has moved dramatically. The most interesting thing is, of course, the role of the church.
Yes.
Because in the United Kingdom, 30 years ago, churchmen would have said, bishops would have said, that your sexuality is a choice. You've chosen to be homosexual. Nobody says that now.
Right.
So if it's no longer a choice and it's just a fact,
yes, of course,
then maybe it's God-given. Your sexuality, and in which case then the whole argument against homosexuality falls apart. The religious argument against homosexuality falls apart.
Great. Chris, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, good.
Ευχαριστώ.
Παρακαλώ.